Hello, everyone. I'm first going to introduce Patty. Patty Dufault. She is from Luck, and they became a CRCAIH partner in 2013. Their IRB and their work is established under the Human Services Division. They had an IRB structure that was already developed since 2005. Her official language is Ojibwe, and their tribal enrollment in Fond du Lac is 4,200. And they're the little red dot in the corner. And then there's Turtle Mountain. So Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, and we're a Tribal Nations Research Group. We're a 501c3 operating under the, as a branch of the government through our organization. We were established in, our partnership came in 2013 with CRCAIH. Our official language is Ojibwe, and we have 32,365 tribal enrolled members, and we're the little tiny red dot up in the northern part of North Dakota.
Nope, it's mine. Hi, I'm Heather Larsen. So I'm from the Sisseton-Wahpeton, Oyate. We're straight north up the interstate here, right by the North Dakota border. Our reservation goes into North Dakota just a little bit, but it's mainly in northeast South Dakota. So our partnership was established with CRCAIH in 2014. I'm the research specialist. Our tribal research office is housed under our tribal education department. So a little bit different than the other tribal partners. Our tribal IRB is called a local research review board. We have a research code, that's the Chapter 77 referenced up on the slide. So a tribal law governing research. Okay.
Good afternoon. A lot of familiar faces, some new ones. It's good to see you all. My name is Simone Bordeaux. I'm an enrolled member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. I am a nurse by background. Historically, the Rosebud Sioux tribe has never had their own tribal research review board. That responsibility has been with our tribal health board. We were the last to come on board as a CRCAIH partner in later December 2015 with a tribal resolution to have a develop our tribal research infrastructure within our Rosebud Sioux Tribe Health Administration Office. Our official language is Lakota. Enrolled members, 34,105.
Again, as you've heard today, the Collaborative Research Center for American Indian Health is a grant through NIMHD that was established in 2012. And under those, we have the Administration Core, the Community Engagement Innovation Division, Methodology Core, and Regulatory Knowledge Core, and Cultural Science and Bioethics Core. And just to go over some of the aims, as each core and division works with each tribal partner on an individual basis, and sometimes we do group meetings, but each core and division has helped the tribal partners establish the research infrastructure, as I mentioned. And they're all unique, they're all different. I think you all kind of heard that in introduction. Some of them are under health boards, some of them are a nonprofit, some of them are under the education office. So just to mention some of the aims, so up top we have the administration core, which kind of oversees and helps them with their scope of work, evaluation, and is the fiscal manager. Then community engagement innovation, just really helping to educate stakeholders, community members. Some of the things we've worked with recently with our tribal partners is newsletters, working on their website, and working with Simone soon on Lunch and Learns. Culture, science, and bioethics. Again, and that's a partnership that we have with the National Congress of American Indians Policy Research Center. Initially, CSBC was to help develop and integrate training modules on research for American Indian communities and health researchers. And lately, working with NCI has really helped to bring training to some of the research review board members of our tribal partners and helping them to see the benefit of research in tribal communities. And then we have the Regulatory Knowledge Core, which provides regulatory support for communities and researchers. You've heard them mention some of their policies and codes, helping get that off the ground. Consulting, monitoring, and controlling the quality of research projects. And just kind of a brief timeline to give you guys some context. Again, CRCAIH was funded in 2012, and at that point we had 2 tribal partners that were written into the grant, the Oglala Sioux Tribe, and at the bottom we have Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, who was a previous partner. 2013, Fond du Lac and the Tribal Nations Research Group joined. 2014, Sisseton became a partner along with Spirit Lake Nation through their college. 2015, Rosebud Sioux Tribe became a partner. The last 4, kind of some of the bigger things, I guess. OST had a research conference. Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe still has their research conference. It's not on there. I know it's coming up soon. So if you do check out the Red Talk table out here, I do believe Ray has information on the upcoming conference in Eagle Butte. RST had a supplement grant that Simone will talk about here shortly. And then 2017 and 18, TNRG had a Data Matters conference that Anita will touch base on. Again, so we'll just kind of go over the cores and divisions and how they have helped each tribe in their communities in establishing their capacity in the research. Do you want this one? Just a note, we don't have Patty, so work with us.
So the administration core of the CRCAIH project is a little different and you'll see that each one of these cores and divisions throughout the whole lifespan of the partnership between the tribal partners and the Collaborative Research Center for American Indian Health is different, a lot different. And that was what I have to say was so amazing about our partnership with Sanford and with CRCAIH, is that we were each able to go our own direction and do what we needed to do to move forward with all of our projects, whether it be a research review board, whether it be a FWA, whether it be research projects, community health assessments, whatever it was that we needed to have done in our communities to build research infrastructure, we were able to do. And that was done a lot in collaboration with our administration, with the CRCAIH administration team. And, just kind of, there's been a lot of people who've kind of come and went with that division. But it was always just having a lot of discussions. So we did evaluation through our quarterly reports, and then we had a consultant team that came in last year at the end of the project who did an evaluation, and we did interviews and did surveys and those types of things for our work with CRCAIH. And then Engage for Equity, and that was, I think, the beginning project that we all kind of started off with in the beginning. So you'll see over time how this project has really shaped and changed a lot. From the very first year that I became a partner in 2013, our team became a partner, and how it's changed. So another big piece of it was the strategic planning. So what are we going to do for the next 2 years if you just became a partner, or the next 3 years? What's your end goal? And really looking at our reports and seeing how that's changed over time. What we might have wanted to do something in the beginning that we thought, oh, this is the best way to do it. And then learning from that process each year through our quarterly reports, and when we couldn't get things done on time. And I know I hear researchers always talk about, oh Lord, we have to go through like 5 IRBs, and in my timeline on my grant, I said I'd have those all done in the first year, and I'm in year 2 and I still don't have them all done. Our goal at Turtle Mountain is to ensure we don't put that as a hurdle in your process, that we could get you in and out with approvals like within 2 months. And we just looked at some reports the other night, and we have like a 14-day turnaround from application to approval. So that's what our average turnaround is, and it's mostly because we have a 2-week deadline that's 2 weeks prior to the IRB meeting. So it gives all of our membership time to review all the documents and everything. So a lot of times researchers don't submit those till the last day or finalize it until they know it's got to be in that day for the next meeting. So it's just working through all of those things. And then for TNRG, a lot of our work has been with sustainability. So how could we sustain our 501c3, our IRB, and how could we merge those two together to ensure that we're always going to be around? And that's one goal that we had at Turtle Mountain, was to make sure we were always going to be there, because tribal councils come and go, but TNRG doesn't, it stays there. And so your councils can leave, and a lot of times in the old way we did it, the process for approval of research left with that council. Because in Turtle Mountain, all of our councils change at one time. So we have a potential of having all new leadership every 2 years. So we had to try to build something that was a little bit more stable. And then to me, they were just like overall support. And I think this was true for most of the partners. It was just overall support in our project and working with our tribal governments, working with our community health boards in our communities, and defining all of that. So that's what we do. You guys want to add?
So like Anita said, on the left side of all of these slides in the bold will be all the similarities or all the different projects that the tribal partners have in common with the specific core division. And then on the right where it's not bold, those are just tribally specific projects. So with my tribe, the SWO, Sisseton-Wahpeton, Oyate, I was able to do a presentation, my first regional presentation with Danielle, Dr. Kenyon, at SDSU, which I had just graduated from a couple months previously. I finished my grad program. So it really meant, for me, it was a really big accomplishment to be able to go back there a couple months after I was done and be able to present on the work that we were doing, collaborating with Sanford Research and then our own tribal community. So just being able to get the word out through different kind of avenues is something that wasn't expected in administration, but it ended up happening with a lot of our different corps and divisions.
And one thing I didn't mention I was only speaking to the left side of the board. Now the right side is where our specific work specifically with CRCAIH has been, where we've partnered with them in a grant submission or some grant submissions where TNRG or Turtle Mountain is the applicant, as opposed to Sanford becoming, being the applicant and then managing the project. And we've moved to where TNRG and Turtle Mountain is the actual applicant now, with Sanford supporting us in that way, like mentoring us through some of our grant projects that we want to move forward with, some pilot projects, some research training, and developing our own tribal researchers at the tribal level and from our tribes, from the 5 tribes in the state. So that's where our relationship's a little different from all the other partners.
So the next division is community engagement and innovation. When Melissa had broke down the triangle that is CRCAIH, this is a pretty big chunk of it. And it's not something that only happened in the beginning years of building our tribal research infrastructure, for all of us. It's something that is just ongoing and won't ever end. So it's pretty important. I know when I began in this field, I didn't realize how much of my time would be dedicated to community education and engagement. It's a super important piece in our tribal communities. So we call Community Engagement and Innovation Division SEED, and the SEED staff helped the tribal partners we're in the process of establishing what our health and research priorities are, so making our own agenda for what research we want conducted in our tribal communities. They provided a lot of assistance with conducting community health assessments, whether that was for the first time in these communities or something that had been happening for decades. Just kind of looking at what tools they were using and how to better improve those. The next thing was we, SEED helped coordinate some tribal partner retreats for all 5 of us to not just speak on the phone on a quarterly basis, but to be able to get together in person and start networking, sharing resources, setting goals together, and just trying to not reinvent the wheel. And so we started having a quarterly tribal partner retreat, going not to different reservations. Sometimes, like, they came to our reservation this last time, but trying to meet somewhere in the middle geographically is difficult because we're pretty spread apart, but we're used to that. So, but to be able to get together and really connect in person, face to face, was fun and productive too. Another thing that SEED was assisted with was all of the annual summit presentations, whether it was a panel or a pre-conference session, the posters you just saw over lunch. SEED has helped us with that progress and kind of reviewing everything for us and coming up with a theme and kind of putting our names out there. It's the same thing with like on a national level too. You know, some of us are presenting at different conferences or having posters, writing different journal articles, and SEED has a really big part in that. The next thing is community engagement tools and materials. Melissa talked about this a little bit, so, and this was something pointed out on our posters, if you had a chance to look at them. We all do have very different tools and products and materials that we use in our communities, and it changes over time. For example, like social media will not work in my community, but I know it does in Turtle Mountain. Having newsletters, just looking at what is on your website, what you want made available for your tribal community members to read on the website, or what you want available for researchers, just trying to look at how you can keep the community, the tribal community and also the research community engaged and educated on the work that you're doing. So that's something that is vital to continuing to get the buy-in from one, our tribal leadership, and then just our entire tribal membership. It's something that is really important to be able to explain to them what this work is, and that research is not a bad thing. It's something that can help our tribe build capacity and, you know, move forward in a good way. So.
So one thing unique to Rosebud that we've worked very closely with SEED is an administrative supplement grant that we were awarded. It was just perfect timing when we came on board. We were able to start getting into this. I worked really closely with Melissa. Part of that was doing 10 stakeholder interviews, which was primarily with our health board and our program directors. And those questions were geared to try to determine how ready our community was to start this effort. A part of that also was developing the Sicangu Oyate community profile, and that's the picture you guys see on the slide now. That document it's basically a snapshot of our community. I think all of us, a lot of times we get questions from researchers and providers that want to partner with us as our demographic statistics, kind of the layout and culture of our community. So this document is able to lay out most of that for Rosebud. There's demographic information in there, employment information, our local schools, our health programs. There's an asset map. So it's been disseminated and recently asked for with our IHS facility. I believe they use this now as part of their orientation for their new providers that are at IHS. I think that's it.
One thing that stood out for OST with SEED was our R13 grant that we used to host a community research conference in May of 2015. I know that Elizabeth Belt had worked closely with Dr. Victoria Grayowl on that, and it did bring a lot of attention. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be Patty too, besides Anita. Since I introduced her, I get to be here today, I guess. Well, we're both Chips, so I guess it'll work out. We both have maybe the same accent. So anyway, for the regulatory core, this core was huge for every tribal partner. I often think about how they kept up with the workload, because there was 2 of them, and we would have some very long, intense phone calls with these people, and a lot of follow-up, a lot of off-call work for them. But I do have to say that they were super, super awesome, and I don't think many of us would have achieved what we need to achieve without the support of the regulatory core. So one of the really big things is that our online application submission process. It's taken Turtle Mountain quite some time to get that process up and running. It's a software program that we purchased as partners, and the university people are probably going to cringe when they hear how we managed to get access to that software, and we're not going to tell our secret. But as tribes, often we get to do consortium activities. And so we were able to purchase this software all together as one organization, because we all had the same mission and goals in mind. So we get access to some excellent software and flexible software and usable software for a very discounted price. So, you know, that's what I think is, and this software has been like a lifesaver in the last 6 months for Tribal Nations Research Group. And I know OST is on the software, and Heather is ready to launch hers. Heather's a perfectionist, by the way, so she wants everything to be perfect, perfect, perfect. And last night I told her, Heather, I have the bike. I told her, Heather, just implement it. You'll work out the bugs. And there hasn't been a lot of bugs except Dr. Besk asking me every time why there's a little green arrow that bounces. And I'm like, because they want you to fill out that section. So, you know, we haven't had any really big problems with our software. And then consent and protocol development, you know, how do we develop consent forms and I know this was a big one for Patty, because they actually did a research project. Fond du Lac started off as a partner doing research, and they've since kind of merged with the rest of us, realizing that maybe their research infrastructure wasn't as well developed as they initially had thought. So now her focus over the last year and over the next year, I think, is going to be redesigning their IRB and reworking their IRB process and relooking at all of that and making sure that it's in compliance in the right place. And we've all had on-site training for different things: IRB, local review boards, research review boards, health boards. So and these are all have a lot of big differences for each and every one of us as partners. They all have a different meaning. You know, and I think you'll learn more about that this evening at the workshop if you come to that. We'll be talking about the differences in why one tribe decided to do something one way and another tribe decided to do something a different way. And there really is a big difference. Although the name's the same, like I could call my IRB Anita's afternoon luncheon meeting if I wanted to, and it would, as long as it was governed by the same laws that my tribe said it needed to be abided by, and our federal government said with the Office of Human Rights and Protections, then I guess I could name my IRB whatever we want to, but we just chose to call it the TMBCI Research Review Board. We kept it simple, even though it is Anita's luncheon meeting. And Katie's is her wasted Saturday meeting, she says. No, I'm just joking. She's like, I have to spend almost every Saturday in an IRB meeting. So her meetings are on Saturdays. At least I get to do mine with lunch, and I get a free lunch out of it too. So, and many of us, all of us have a research code of some type, or are developing a research code. I know Simone is getting there. And the struggles that each of us had developing those research codes, none of this stuff has been easy. You guys as researchers, or as tribal people who live in the reservations, or who've done research in the reservations, or with tribal groups, realize the struggle with governments, tribal governments, and what the politics behind all of that. And I'm not a politician. I'm one of those kind of people who's just like, why can't I do this? Like, why can't I do it? Like, what's so hard about it? And they're like, well, there's this you got to think about and this you got to. So I had to learn how to kind of work the tribal politics system a little bit. We all have policies and procedures of some type. We've shared some of those. I still can't figure out why Patty feels like her policies and procedures aren't strong, because I basically copied Patty's policies and procedures and they're working for me. You know, we've shared documents across each other's work. So that's one of the strengths of our partnership, I think. And then we did the IRB toolkit. I think every tribal partner, a couple years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, we published, CRCAIH published the IRB toolkit, which was a very nice put together booklet with a jump drive with a lot of documents that tribes could use to establish their own IRBs in their reservations and their communities. And well, we all had a piece of that somewhere. And I'm gonna be quite honest, I think Katie's work, probably our OST's work, is the basis for majority of that booklet, because their forms, I think we all adapted. They were the only ones in our partnership who had forms. So I think if you look at all of our forms, they'd be similar. And just a little backstory about all this, a lot of it is like our tribal colleges way back in the day when they were first starting. I have a tribal college background. I was at Turtle Mountain Community College for 18 years prior to starting and working with Tribal Nations Research Group. But if you look at like Sitting Bull and Fort Berthold and Turtle Mountain, we all were established like the same time. They call them the original 6 tribal colleges. You look at their student handbooks and their catalogs, and their policies are pretty identical. They're very similar. Over time, they've changed, but a lot of those policies are still the same, and some of them are still word for word, because we didn't have the resources and the staff to all develop our own policies and our own procedures. So we shared documents to get things accomplished quicker than what we had time for. And then we all have a research catalog. So I'm pretty excited to say that ours is almost ready to go online and ready for everybody to have access to soon. So it's going to be exciting for that. And I don't know if you guys know what a research catalog is. So a research catalog is each one of us as tribes went and found all of our old research, or just started at where we were when we established, and we maintain like this research. It would be like a catalog. So it tells like who did the research, where was the research done, what are the keywords of the research, what are the findings, and what's any data that that came out of that, any final reports, any like annual reports, closeout reports. We have all of that listed. And Turtle Mountain went back to 1986, I think, and we're still going to look for things prior to that, but we have to go into jury boxes to do it before that, and I'm just haven't had enough guts to go into that jury room and look in that room because I don't know what's in there. So one of these days I'm going to hire a guy to go in there and do it. And he could face everything bad in that room. So, yeah, so that's where we're at with as tribes. And just a little bit on this side that was kind of special to Turtle Mountain is we're FWA, so we actually hold an FWA for our tribe. With TNR, our tribe has an FWA and we maintain that for our tribal government. And then TNRG is like an IRB under our tribe. And we established it that way so that, say, the college does want to start an IRB, they would just fall under the tribe's FWA, and then they would be the IRB. They would be the IRB number 2, our TMB. Turtle Mountain Community College IRB. They would still fall under the laws of the tribe and our research code. So I wouldn't see the benefit of that because we'd both have to maintain software and we'd both have to do this. So why, would you want to do something like that? But we did leave that open for further opportunity. So.
Well, before I talk about the fee structure, we are also under an FWA with our tribe. But at this point, I think we are the only tribal partner that has a fee structure in place. We did update it in 2014. And at this point, I'm not sure if the board is still going to be updating it, but it is what it is. I did share some of the information that we had used to create that, so I'm sure the partners here will probably be implementing their own very soon.
Okay, I was told that maybe I need to explain what a FWA is. I thought I'm in a room of researchers, everybody knows what a FWA is, but I guess not. Okay, so FWA is a federal-wide assurance. And what's that saying is that our IRB meets or exceeds all the standards of the Office of Human Rights and Protections. So besides those Office of Human Rights and Protections that we have to follow to be an FWA and be able to approve research for NIH or any of those organizations, we also have to follow a tribal law, which has to be at least more strict than at least equal to or more strict than. And you'll hear tonight too, it's kind of hard not to talk about our process because we're really unique compared to the other tribes, but tonight you'll hear a little bit more about how unique we are in using research and how it's approved and what we approve. So, but I did want Heather to talk a little bit about her poster and the presentations and the opportunities we've had through the Regulatory Corps. Will you talk about that? Our premier partnership for you and I.
Okay. Patty, we are messed up because Patty's gone. It's like we keep skipping one. It's like but I like this new Patty. She's cracking all kinds of jokes. Anita. So with Primer, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that organization, but it's Public Responsibility in Medicine and Research, a national organization. And Turtle Mountain had a poster with a staff member from the Regulatory Knowledge Corps. They submitted a poster together and were able to go to that national conference and present that, I believe, on the work, on this collaborative work. And then I was also able to partner with that same staff member from Regulatory Knowledge Corps to co-present. Her and I co-presented together this past November at the Primer Conference. And I won't say it's not their, I definitely know it's not their first time having tribal IRB content at Primer, but it's not something that is like a regular occurrence. There isn't a lot on their agenda that covers anything with tribal IRBs. And so for me, that was a huge goal and accomplishment to be able to have even a breakout session. And what we talked about there was different unique aspects to tribal IRB and how to help researchers kind of navigate our tribal communities and that type of thing. So it went really well. NCAI, the National Congress of American Indian Policy Research Center, also submitted a proposal to Primer for to have a panel session. And Anita initially was supposed to go, and then I ended up going for her, which was nice. Thank you, Anita. I never said thank you for that. But yeah, she gave me a national conference to speak at, and I had like 7 days to prep, mind you. So that was a sarcastic thank you to Anita. But so there's a panel, a lady from the Alaska IRB, a gentleman from Oklahoma at their tribal IRB, and then myself. And the portion I talked about was, one person talked about sovereignty and what that means for the room, to just kind of give that context and explain. The other one gave like a historical background on research with Native Americans, our research conducted in Indian country, and then my section was about developing a tribal IRB. So in the next workshop we have tonight, we'll discuss some of those things as well. Those are just opportunities that wouldn't have happened without the collaboration with this core. Okay, I'm back. So the next one is methodology core. Like Anita talked about, there right away when CRCAIH started, there was the tribal IRB toolkit. And recently, I think a couple years ago, CRCAIH developed a data management toolkit, which is a little different from the tribal IRB. It doesn't have like a lot of templates and those types of things that the tribal IRB toolkit has, but it covers different subject matters. Like if you're looking to write a data management plan and you're wanting to write different policies or procedures on how to handle specific things like data return to your community, you know, what would that look like at Rosebud? It might look completely different from what Sisseton wants to require in their data being returned, and it could look really different from project to project. So it's difficult to write those types of policies and procedures because it's best to keep them pretty broad. There's a lot of on a case-by-case basis for those types of things. But the data management plan covers things like data sharing, data dissemination in your community, like I mentioned, the data return. So anything about how, as a sovereign nation, you're going to control and own the data and how you're going, like what that's going to look like. I know we don't have, I don't know if anybody has their plan completely done. It's kind of a work in progress because so that toolkit is helpful. That's also available on the CRCAIH website along with the tribal IRB toolkit. So that's another good resource to use. So the methodology course staff has helped with us trying to navigate those plans and figure out what we want our policies to state. And then data analysis, the methodology core has helped some of the tribal partners with certain research projects, helping them to kind of learn how to do data analysis on their own. So they provided training and assistance with that. There's been other on-site trainings, basically by request from the different tribal communities on what they felt their needs were with anything techie. It's such a techie core, it's hard to explain everything that they do. I know the data return has been huge because before we had tribal IRBs, there wasn't a place where the data was really being housed, and specifically coming from the research projects. So that's something that is really meaningful to our communities, and something we're all still, it looks very differently, but we're all still trying to figure out what that process is or trying to finalize that process, I guess. And then the methodology core helped, along with SEED, with those community health assessments that either were already being conducted in the community or began to be implemented, or they would help kind of update those.
And I know one thing for Patty right now, this summer she did they've been doing their community needs assessment since 1978. They do a biennial, and they did theirs this summer, so we went out and helped get folks to do the assessment at the health fair. And so I think they've been starting to analyze the data, but I know more recently the methodology core and Dr. Hansen have been helpful in helping them analyze the data and getting that data back to them so they can make better decisions within the Human Services Division.
This is the real Anita. I have to say something about that last slide and with the community engagement. It's really hard because they kind of work in conjunction so much with each other, but Turtle Mountain also did a community health assessment. And part of that process was 2 of the tribal partners were awarded a training grant, and OSD and myself were those 2 partners. And we selected somebody from the community to go on this training so that we can do our community health assessment. And Dr. Victoria Grayowl was a huge part of that. She attended the training with our tribal members and 1 staff from my organization. And together we established a comprehensive community health assessment that has been just so useful over time, and it's been used in so many different ways and used to apply for so many different projects across our tribal government and our tribal programs. And it's just like a really living, breathing document, and I think that's so important as part of the community engagement and the methodology, because they give us feedback on some of the questions on the assessment and that type of work. So, and we also did some posters in Spirit Lake on them, so I think that was really cool that we were able to do that. That's a lot of work that we probably wouldn't have been able to accomplish without having those partnerships. So my slide, this is actually my slide now. This is the one I was supposed to talk about and not Patty's. It was the Culture, Science, and Bioethics Core. And that's currently the relationship and the partnership that CRCA and the CRCA Partners have with the National Congress of American Indians Policy Research Center. And what they offer is a lot of training, community-based training. They have a curriculum that they utilize to go in and help educate and reach out to tribal communities. And they basically organize it however you want to have it. You don't need to use all the modules. I think there's 8 modules in it. And you don't need to use all 8 of the modules if you're in a different level. You're able to start at whatever level throughout those 8 modules. And timing and whatever else just wasn't ever good for Turtle Mountain, so we never had the training in our community. But what we did do is we did some work with Dina around him and doing some presentations. She was with the center at the time, and Malia and I have co-presented on a couple different things. So we had a kind of a different relationship with the National Congress of American Indians. But the one thing prior to the current relationship with the Culture, Science, and Biocore with the National Congress of American Indians was some work that was done with Dr. Jean Thin-Elk and I don't remember, Jana Prasic. Jana, I get Jana, Jen, and Kathy all mixed up, but Jana Prasic, they developed some training modules that were kind of focused on tribal level like kind of a little similar, like a city module for tribes. That was our beginning work with them, and there's some really good work done in there. And so at some point in time, as I would like to pick that work up through TNRG and move it forward so that tribes have that that basis. And I know there's other projects like that being developed throughout the United States right now, but I just know Gene's work from way back in the day, and he has always been inspirational to me. So I'd like to somehow make sure that that work gets brought to the table someplace else along the line. So does anybody else?
Something that's kind of unique to Rosebud with the research that benefits Native people that Anita had spoke about, as part of the administrative grant that we were awarded, we were able to offer this training to our community within the first year. We had felt like it was really important to have this training offered to our leadership prior to introducing the research code. We felt it was really important for them to have that education and be a little bit more informed before we had presented the code to them. So like I said, within the first year, Dr. Malia Valles, Dina around him, and Sarah Patalski, had come out to Rosebud, and they were able to do the training with our tribal health board and our tribal program directors. Tribal partner collaboration. So this was an unexpected outcome. It was not originally written into the grant as a core or a division. But as we had all kind of sat in on meetings, I know they had mentioned to you that we do quarterly tribal partner calls, and then we also had several tribal partner retreats. I believe the first one we had was in Pierre. We kind of met at a central location. And then from there, we went up to Sisseton and were able to do our second tribal retreat there. At the second one, we were also able to sit in on a short presentation from an intern on data governance. But a lot of this in the conversations that we have is research, resource sharing, able to identifying each other's strengths, collaborating and coming in on joint presentations, networking and support. And I just want to thank all of these ladies ahead of time for the accomplishments and the work that they've done prior to me coming on board. They have been an incredible guide for me to be able to move our efforts forward in Rosebud. Resource sharing, a lot of that is just information, document sharing, like Anita had kind of touched on earlier. A lot of time we have research projects that are done in several or shared research, I guess, that we have in our communities. Like I know frequently there's a lot of research projects that are like, if they're done in OST, a lot of times we have very similar demographics, so they'll be done in Rosebud too. So a lot of the processes that they were able to share with me, we kind of try to, they are all obviously unique, but we try to keep them, I guess, as similar as we can to make it a little easier on the research staff that we work with.
One thing I'd like to add about this, and we touched on this in our posters if you got a chance to look at those. What we wanted to do in this panel session, since it's the last summit, is to kind of highlight how the collaborative partnership has helped our tribal communities. And so to specifically break down just some of the accomplishments that we've been able to make with each specific core and division of CRCAIH. The tribal partner collaboration is not a part, it wasn't, at least to my knowledge, not an expected outcome of the grant. But over the years, and there have been some other tribal partners that were on as well, we just began collaborating together and wanting to first it was like, oh, let's talk on the phone quarterly, and then it turned into emails, and then it was like, let's meet in person. And we started learning from each other, and initially it was the resource sharing, but there was a lot more to that. For me, myself, and our community, I don't have a lot of people that I can bounce ideas off or even talk to about research. And so to be able to have the support from the other tribal partners is really vital to my progress in the work that I do. But so this is not one of the core divisions, but it's something that is really important to us, and it was something that we just wanted to be able to show as one of the the big outcomes that is kind of helping us build our research infrastructure.
Okay, so I don't really have much to say about. No, our partners have been amazing altogether. Like, you can call Heather, Snapchat Heather, or give. One of the big things is OST is that they've been doing this for quite some time. So when we have questions on research projects, it's like, let's call OST. Let's see if they've had this project before. So I think that's a good piece of it. It's like, why did this happen and why did this happen? So we do talk amongst each other, and I think that's really important, because all we ever want to do, all of us, is make sure that research is done in a good way in our communities, and that it's relevant and important to our tribes. So, and as far as a support system, that's definitely been the case with even just not even the tribal partners, but with all of the CRCA personnel. There's been times I've probably had breakdowns and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Like a big example is like last week, I had a staff member who resigned like quickly, and I thought, how am I gonna go to Sioux Falls? We have 3 projects, grants due, and I have to get those submitted before I leave, and then they're due like the following Monday after I get back from the conference, so I have to get them submitted before I leave. Then I have another meeting in Grand Forks on Wednesday, so I'm like, how am I gonna do all this? I can't go to the summit, and I feel bad. That was my first thought. So I call and text Danielle and Jess, and it's like, what am I gonna do? And they're like, just talk through it, Anita. So we solved it, and we're here, and it's all good, and we figured out our problem, but sometimes you just need somebody to talk to, so.
For me, yes, the support between the tribal partners has been amazing. Although OST has been up and running for a while, it is nice to get some insight onto what could be better, revising our policies, revising our forms, just being able to talk to somebody that understands where I'm coming from, and hopefully they're learning as much as I am. Trying to stay up to date with all these different regulations and things like that seem to be changing all the time. So, Anita, don't go anywhere.
So just, as the CRCA staff and as somebody that's with the community engagement, it's funny because I'm always like, wait, I feel like a tribal partner, but I'm not. I'm like with CRCA. But, working with the tribal partners over the last 3 years has been, it's not always easy because we're in 5 different cities, we're in 2 different time zones, 3 different states. So trying to get a conference call or trying to get us all together or, trying to be supportive to them it's not always easy, but I know they get it done. And I think about how much work they do in their communities. And it's, I think I'm just here for community engagement, but that's just one piece of everything that they do on a daily basis, from working with the researchers to trying to work with their board to approve protocols and research and trying to engage their stakeholders and their community leaders. So I know they have a lot on their plate, so I just, thank you ladies also for your time. And with that, we have a lot of time, I've noticed, so please, are there any questions that you have for any of the tribal partners? Again, they're all unique in their communities and the research that they do and they're building.
don't know to what extent collaborations exist with the public school systems. One of the things that we connect with as scientists are starting to work with communities is the extent at which research can exist and involve students. Do you have any relationships with the schools in the community, and what does that look like, and how has that pathway looked in your process?
Anita, this is Anita. I can't answer Patty's research. All I know is they do some opioid research. So methadone, I remember methadone all the time is the strong one at Fond du Lac. But as far as like partnerships with researchers, that's where our uniqueness comes in at TNRG. TNRG, besides a research like an IRB, like you had to start a nonprofit for an IRB. No, that's like 20% of our work. We're actually a tribal data center, and we've developed a huge like amount of data about our tribe, about our county, about tribes in the state of North Dakota, and how we kind of like some comparison data. We've recovered a lot of data from other research projects that were old that the data hadn't been returned, and we're putting those in certain places. And one of our big focuses has been like all the national studies that are done with like YRBS and making sure that data in like the North Dakota kids count, that data is all relevant and it's good pieces of information and usable. Because a lot of data out there a lot of times isn't usable for tribal communities. It's you look at it and you just look at it and you think, how did they come up with this number? Like, where did this number come from? Sometimes you just wonder if they kind of pulled it out of, like, I have a rule. Anytime a number is reported as a 7 or a 9 ending in those numbers, then they're more likely not true numbers. Like, they've got the number from someplace, or I see people cringing in the audience. Seriously, these numbers are fake numbers. We've validated some of it. We're like, we go back and we ask, where did this number, where did you get this statistic from? Where's the data that you could tell us that this is an actual statistic for our community? And they can't answer it. People in our own community have done that. In writing grants, they're trying to figure out, well, what's the number in our community? Okay, let's guess. We know this much and we know this much. So if we average those two together, then this is our number. We're trying to encourage people in our organization to stop doing that. Because we don't know when you start evaluating your process, you don't know if it's ever you're doing any good. And my thing is, let's be accountable. Let's make sure we're making a difference. If we're going to get money from the feds or whoever, then we need to be making sure we're doing the right thing with that money and that we're making a difference in our tribal communities, because those are our people and our kids. And with the school system, there's a big NAM study right now, and we've actually helped our schools get permission and collaborate. We've helped the researcher get in and work with the schools and get that data that they need and get the signatures that they need to do the research and do the surveys in the community. And at Turtle Mountain, we don't only do human subjects research review. We do, our code reads that it's like any systemic collection of data. So if you're coming in and you're going to collect a lot of evaluation data, you got to come through our IRB. And the reason why is because we want that data when you're done. And we want to make sure what you're evaluating and what you're doing is useful to our community. Think about it. How many research projects you have? Active protocols right now? She's got 83 active research projects in OST. 83. Probably 10%. How many of those probably are diabetes research? 4, 3, maybe 5. Okay, 5% of those research protocols are on diabetes. And you have a community of 32,000 people and probably only maybe 25,000 of those living in OST. You got 500 people, 600 people maybe who have diabetes, maybe it's probably more. But you have 4 research projects going on diabetes, then you're researching those same people all the time. Pretty soon you become the rabbit in the the rat in the cage. You know, you're constantly being researched, and we need to control that as tribes because we're not getting any answers as tribes. And we want to make sure that what the research being done, it's making a difference. And we're realists. We realize that clinical research takes time and that a project may be 20 years. And it may take 20 years to find and get a breakthrough. But if you're bugging and wanting information from those same people constantly, you know, that's really hard on our communities. So think about when you're putting a research project together, you know, especially like with the opiate crisis right now. There's a lot of people wanting to get in and do research on that do that kind of work. And you think about, you know, you have maybe some teens who have recovered or maybe have come off of drugs, and how much are they going to be researched? How many people are going to want access to those kids and say, what makes you different from this person to this person because you were able to get out and you were able to get help? So when you're writing research protocols, think about that. When you're writing for research grants or coming up with ideas to do research in tribal communities, think about how many times your sample population has had to answer those same questions and be that same research being done on them. Because as tribal IRBs, that's what we have to think about when we're reviewing protocols. We have to think about how many times our elders have been asked questions about language loss and how that hurts them every time they have to answer that question about culture being lost. And when they have to think about it, how they've made, I had an elder who told me once, you know, I'm gonna stop doing interviews because I have to reflect back so much, and it brings back some of my boarding school thoughts. Because why don't my kids know their language? And I know it, I'm fluent. I could still talk it today, even though I haven't spoke a full blown-on conversation with anybody for 20 years. I could still do whatever, I could still say whatever I need to say in Ojibwe. I have to look at my own failure, and I can't look at that anymore because that's me going back to the boarding school and why I'm a failure, why I didn't let my child learn the language. And that's one of my biggest faults as a parent and as a grandmother and as a great-grandmother, as an aunt, is I didn't teach my family, I didn't do my job as a mother and teach my kids the language. So, you know, think about that as researchers. I think that's an important piece. And I know this morning Abigail talked about and touched on some very important topics. And that's like, you got to think about the community you're researching.
So in Sisseton, I don't work with the public schools. I've done a little bit of work with our tribe. We have 2 tribal schools and then a tribal college. But honestly, I just don't have the time. I'm a 1-staff office, as most of us are. And like it's been mentioned, we wear a lot of different hats. And for me, when it comes to community engagement, I focus on our adults. A lot of the adults are the people making the decisions on whether, you know, their child is going to participate in a project that's in the schools or whether they're going to participate in any of the projects. I mean, those are the people in our program manager positions, like our leadership positions. So those are the people I am trying to spend the most time educating on why it's important to have research oversight, or why we should have research on community. I wish I had more time. I come from a higher education background, so I would love to work more with students, especially at our tribal college, but it's just something I don't have time for. The public school, I don't think public schools have an IRB, but so our tribal IRB is over Teoshpazina Tribal School, and then our other tribal schools enemies. So our tribal college, our 2 tribal schools, we do the oversight for any research conducted on our reservation.
Sorry for making you walk so far. Hi, I have so many questions. I'm going to limit it to maybe like a 2-part question, if that's okay. So my name is Nicole. I work with Simone in the Rosebud Sioux Tribe Health Administration. One of the things that Simone has been navigating now with a lot of bravado, that's not the right word, is getting the IRB approved by tribal council, a lot of whom don't really have intimate knowledge of IRB research codes, and had a lot of questions, particularly about the confidentiality wording in it, which I think, yeah. And so I guess my first part of the question is, how do you, can you talk a little bit about your navigation with tribal council, especially with council members who may not be as intimately familiar with like research codes, et cetera? And then similarly, if you put any special protocols in place for confidentiality, especially if your community is on the smaller end. And for instance, I did research with the Rosebud Sioux Tribe on young parents, and like there's obviously a finite number of people who gave birth under age 16. So my fear is always, even after stripping out details and everything, like kind of by deduction, you can still figure out who's who.
My question back to you is, are you coming to the workshop? Because those are all things we're covering in the workshop that's next. Well, now you can't really say no. I put you on the spot. Okay. So the first part was about the authority to get a tribal IRB? Like, what does that look like? Is that what your question was? Or just your experience navigating through the tribal council process. The polite version? Yeah. Just kidding. Okay, so it's different in every community. So it's hard to say this is how it happens, but our community is a good example because it has every example of what authority can be given. So our tribal chairman, a couple tribal chairmen ago, made a motion during tribal council to start a tribal IRB because he felt it was important. Then directed our tribal education director to find, or basically to write a research code. She luckily found the partnership with CRCAIH, and so we have our tribal resolution that was next, approving that partnership and to build our research infrastructure. Some tribes will just have a motion, some will have a resolution. Next thing that our tribe did was we wrote a research code, which is a law on tribal research, so it's a very long process, just like writing any law. It took over a year to get it passed, and then once it did, it's not saying that the motion that was initially made isn't important or valid. We just did all three. Not every tribe will do that, and some may not have any. So it's a difficult question to answer, and the navigation is different every community. So yeah, it is a half-an-hour discussion in our workshop, that question. And the second part on confidentiality, once again, that's your question was, how can researchers better protect confidentiality?
I guess, yeah, specifically in sovereign nations where it is a small population, and if you're studying a specific group of smaller population, like confidentiality just de facto can be hard to maintain.
That is the researcher's responsibility to figure that out. I mean, that's how I feel. I have too many other things. I mean, it's definitely something our board considers all the time, and it's something that is very important, and it is easy to identify things that in a different community wouldn't be identifiable, like your example with teen pregnancy. And so that's something that we're totally aware of. It's just one of the things that makes our review unique and more complex. But I don't have a fix-all for researchers on how to do that. My only answer would be do your homework, know your community, build a partnership, and then you'll learn those things not to do. It's not a simple answer.
Well, I guess you would, to me, it's a risk in the research. So you would, one of the things that we find sometimes with our applications is that people try to make it a lot more complicated than it really is. And to me, what I always tell researchers, is like, especially our non-human subjects ones, they're not like, they could walk the line of being human subjects research and non-human. It's more just like, it would be like an expedited review in any other IRB, but we don't do expedited reviews. So, but it's just say exactly what you want to do. Just be honest with us. If this is like the steps that you want to go through to do your data collection, and that's going to be, everybody knows if you do anything that does issues with like teenage pregnancy and those types of things, that there's not enough cases to keep a lot of that confidential. So be upfront with the people that you're researching. Put it in your protocol and say this is going to be a risk. It could potentially, although we'll do everything we can to protect the subject and the confidentiality of who the subjects are, but in the IRB will decide if it's a good enough research to take that risk, is really what it boils down to, or if it's a needed research project to take that risk. Any more questions?
I have a really broad question for you. First of all, thank you for your presentations and your stories. I'm from Alaska. I've been there 26 years. I'm now moving to Portland, but I've been working with tribal communities in a very rural part of Southwest Alaska, and it seems you have so many things to share. And as I understand it, I'm one of the advisors for the new COBRI grant. And one of the things we think about, I directed a COBRI grant for 15 years, and well, the last 7 or 8 years I have directed it, but I've been associated with it for a long time. And we think about sustainability, and it seems what you've been doing and what you've done with Daniela is so important and needs to be sustained. And it seems like, to me, as an ex-COBRI PI, there are so many opportunities where you could share what you've learned and what you're doing and keep it going with the new COBRI Center. And so I'm wondering, I have sort of a 2 or 3 part comment, I guess, for Daniela and others here to think about, and maybe you guys to think about as well. One, how are you going to sustain the important work that you're doing? We all know that it takes time, and it seems like you are all so devoted, and it takes money. So how are you going to sustain it? Is there an opportunity to help sustain it with the new COBRI grant? Because it seems like if you're doing health outcomes research, many of the questions and the resources that you've built are incredibly important for the new investigators that are going to be coming to your communities. So I guess that's really it. How are you going to sustain it? Is there an opportunity to collaborate with the new COBRI? And thank you for your stories. And how are you going to? I think Alaska Native people, at least that I work with in Southwest Alaska, would be fascinated by some of the stories that you just told and some of the things that you've been doing. And how are you going to share that nationally, maybe internationally as well? So how's that for a lot of questions? You can just ad lib, but I think we have 35 minutes, so unless there are other questions.
We're all having our wish list up here. We said, wow, should we go on tour? International travel.
First part was sustainability. There isn't really an answer. There isn't a definite thing, this is what we can do to keep our offices going. For my community, we don't have the fee structure set in place. It's something that we will before the CRCA grant is gone. We have about, like right now, we have currently, I think 23 projects. So that's not going to sustain my salary or, you know, the office. It will partially help fund it, but there are, I've been looking for grants. A lot of the grants that I find are for tribal researchers, which is totally something we need in our community and one of our goals, but it's not for tribal research oversight. Although that's really important and that's the work we're currently doing, I don't know is the best answer I can give you for that. It's scary. I'm really glad that we still have CRCA for another year, not only for the funding, but for the support and assistance that we get. But I don't have a definite answer. One thing that gives in my community, one thing that kind of makes me feel a little better is that we have a tribal law on research. So that groundwork is laid, and you can't just kind of stop having a tribal IRB. It's written into our tribal law. So that helps me sleep at night when I worry about a year from now. The last part. I was talking to a lady I met today during the poster session, and this is for the last part of your layered question about how we are going to get kind of help share what we've learned. And that is something I don't think that any of us expected coming onto the CRCA project. Kind of like when we talked about the tribal partner collaboration that ended up happening between us, that was something, an unexpected outcome. And it's difficult when your home community is not a place where you can have these conversations, which is why we lean on each other so much. But and this is one of the reasons we're having the workshop after this, was we told CRCA, please advertise to any other tribe in the region. We want to tell them what we know so they don't reinvent the wheel. We want to share any resources we have, any lessons learned, any knowledge that we've gained, because we feel, I think culturally, like that's part of kind of our duty of what to do next. Not to claim that we are experts in the field, because I know I'm not. I look up to a lot of the ladies I'm sitting by and lean on them for questions I have, but to be able to give back in some way, because we were the 5 tribes lucky enough to, I mean, it was a very competitive process to become a part of CRCA. A lot of the tribes wanted to be in on this because it was so unique. And I know our tribe was really lucky, and we are grateful for the partnership and everything that we've learned. So I think just being a Native person, you feel the need to give back or give out. And that's part of it. And the other part is that this work is so important that I want every tribe, no matter how big or small, to have something in place instead of nothing. And if we could go on tour, I think we'd all be willing to. We'd get a tour bus and go out there and pitch. Yeah. So we don't have, definite answers for your questions, or at least I don't. But I hope that there's a way to continue the work in our individual tribal communities, and then, on a bigger level, not just regionally, and that's one of the reasons why we are presenting or doing posters, or, is to be able to help non-Native researchers, other researchers, and other tribal communities. So.
TNRG, actually, we submitted a grant together for a NARCH project. We were trying to just find something that fit well. And keeping in mind that, like, when we were writing that, I was keeping in mind all of our tribal partners and how we could, now that we've built the research infrastructure, like, how could we build researchers and start getting our own tribal members who live in the communities to be researchers and engaging at that level. So that was our whole mentality. And Danielle knows that I'm always talking about what we're going to do next, like where are we going to go next. They kind of get sick of me hearing about that because I'm like I'm the energy one. You guys probably already figured that one out. So I'm kind of the one like, let's do this. Like what are we going to do next? Where are we going to go with this? And I agree, we can't let this be like all the other grant programs that, like a lot of the other grant programs that happen in tribal communities. Okay, we do all this work and we build these really great processes. And then when the money's gone, the program's gone. This can't happen. So we can't let that happen to our tribes, especially all the work that's been put into it. And not only at our work, but at the community level. I have 10 people in my community who volunteer on our IRB, and they read documents, and a lot of them not really understanding really what they have to do to be on the IRB, but they learn it really well. They've all been through city training. They've all been through NIH training. I mean, these people have done a lot, and they're volunteers. They don't get paid to serve our IRB. And they spend a lot of time, even outside the actual meetings. I mean, these people come prepped, believe me. Our Turtle Mountains IRB is a tough one. They sit there and they have notes, and they will validate your statistics. And they'll say, how did they come up with this when they did a final report? Like, okay, I don't think that's right. Something's just doesn't sound right here. Let's get them in here and explain what happened and how they got this out of their final numbers. And you know, the researchers a lot of times will say, maybe I better retake a look at my stats. This never happened before, people. This never happened prior to 5-6 years ago. People weren't validating research. People weren't saying, what's this research going to do for our community? So now we are. And I think that's an important momentum. We can't lose this. So my idea is let's do a tribal consortium of IRBs. That's my idea. And we kind of started that. So we have a partnership when I think we have another person in our audience that's kind of, she might have left, but we have about 7 people, and then plus the 5 here, well, Heather's one of them, who we've been meeting with, and how could we do that? So how could we, what I learned, help them in kind of a mentoring program? We just need money to support it, so.
So in my experience, you have to generally submit to several IRBs, including your institutional IRB and then often a tribal IRB. And I think they serve overlapping but distinct functions. Typically, academic IRBs are really focused on the individual, and they're looking at human subjects' protections, harms done to an individual, while the tribal IRBs are often more focused on whether the subject and the topic or the project is appropriate for the community and whether there are going to be community harms. And I think that's an important distinction for 2 reasons. One is because I think that in your thinking about how to interact with researchers, I think it's really important that you point out potential community harms and possibly even have a separate place where you talk about that, because it's often kind of mixed in the reports and the feedback. And I think researchers would benefit from that, because many, including myself, and I've done this for 25 years, often don't realize what all the potential harms are or not harms, if that's true. And the other thing is, I think in our in the consents that we provide to people. We've actually done a study on this with Vanessa Simons, who's Crow, and we worked with a large consortium of projects. They weren't all native, but we looked at the consent forms and we looked at how often, if at all, the consent forms used for studies actually acknowledged that a study had been reviewed by a community board or a tribal IRB, because this involved both, Hispanic and African American and American Indian communities. And they almost never said anything about that. And I think academic researchers should start adding that to the consent forms, because it conveys a sense, I think, of comfort and security to somebody who's signing a consent from a tribal community that their community IRB or their cultural board or whatever it is has actually reviewed the study for potential harms to the community. So I guess my take home is keep doing that. And you can trust that most of the time the academic IRBs are covering all the individual harms because they are, that's their point. But they don't address the things that are pertinent to the community. And you should continue to do that and to alert people about those things, I think, in a systematic way.
It's interesting you said about the academic IRBs, that the academic IRBs usually have the human subjects thing covered. So when you're young and you're just starting out, you use a lot of decision trees and forms for the Health and Human Service reviews. And for the OHRP reviews. Well, so they come with this signed document from the academic institution. So as resourceful as we are, we take all these forms we developed and start using our checkoff sheets. And it's like, well, according to this, it should have went to full board review, but they expedited it. So why did the university expedite this? So here we are on the phone calling the university and saying, okay, you expedited this, but if you use the OHRP decision tree, it shouldn't have been an expedited review. And then it's like, well, okay, so what do you want us to do? Well, we just want you to do, because we're depending on you to have that review done well. So we just want you to be aware that maybe, I don't know, your decision trees are old or something and you're not following them. And so we've had, at Turtle Mountain, we've actually had 4 of those that have had to go back to the institution for review, full board review. Now, it didn't change the fact that they were approved, but we made them aware that we know the process and we check it. So I think we still double check all the university ones. I don't even look at the university IRBs anymore and what they decided. I just really do it on our own in our own process. And then if we have to change something, though, I do have to go back and look, because I don't want them to be stuck in a process that's going to take them another 6 weeks to get approved. So that's where we kind of do a little bit of negotiation with ourselves, is it really that important that we put this person behind another 6 weeks because they have to get this changed at the university level? Turtle Mountain does that. I don't know if the other tribes do that. But we do negotiate a little bit with ourselves, as saying, is it really worth it to make this change? Because it's going to make this person have to go back to the university IRB, has an amendment to their protocol. And we don't want to, we're really aware of the timing for researchers too. Because we don't want to stop research. That's something we don't want to do. But we just want to make sure that it's good research.
Well, just a lot of the IRBs are developing new protocols, and their websites may not be up to date because of the common rule. Mm-hmm. So that's probably complicating some things too.
Yeah, it is for us too.
Find out that the community versus individual harms is talked about in the workshop next.
questions? Oh.
First of all, I just want to say I think you guys are doing such amazing work out there in protecting our tribal communities. And as a tribal member myself, I really appreciate all the hard work you guys have put into the tribal IRBs. With that said, I guess one thing I was interested in is for those of you that are collecting data catalogs for past research within your tribal community, or even outside researchers that came in and performed research with your community. What are the future plans with that data? Is there anything going to be done with that in terms of data analysis, or is it just more to have an idea of what's been done in the past and present with that data, and to even have it stored securely? And then I guess the second follow-up question is with sustainability, if you know, hopefully that doesn't happen where you run out of funding or anything, because I think the IRB boards are really important for tribal communities. What would happen with that data, you know, that you've put together as a catalog to protect it for your communities?
With our catalog, at this point, we wanted to learn what had been covered throughout the years, so we're not researching the same group over and over and over, but also to help us identify our priorities, our needs within the tribe. The data is owned by the tribe, and it really is up to them what they want to do with it. But I know for OST, we wanted to be able to make it available to our people at some point in time, so that way they know what has been covered. They could learn a little bit of what they want to research when the time comes.
For our community, the cataloging was, we don't have a ton of projects. Before we had a tribal IRB, our tribal council would approve projects, and our human services board would approve health-related projects, and then our school boards, the individual school boards, would approve projects within their schools. I recently collected all the health-related research that was conducted before we had a tribal IRB, which I started in 2014. And there was maybe 15 to 20. The main theme with all of them was there was no final report, you know, and that was something we'll talk about in the workshop about helicopter researchers. I swear I'm not getting paid for the workshop. But so that was, you know, other than having the documents that were reviewed by whoever, there was nothing, there was no findings, there was no data. So there was no real use for that, but I do want to show that, hey, this is what was conducted. The other thing, you know, data from previous to 2014 isn't really as relevant anymore, so I didn't collect it for that purpose. It was more just to have proof of what was being researched in our community, and also to show that pattern of, you know, a lack of responsibility. I can't think of that's my nice way of saying not returning the data. But once again, come to the workshop and we'll talk about this.
I have a loud voice. Can I just comment on your comment real quick? One of the things that the tribal community I work with is in a region called the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta of Southwest Alaska, and I'm required for every publication, presentation, graduate student dissertation to submit not only a copy of that to the Tribal Review Board, but a two-page lay summary of exactly what are our research outcomes. Now, we practice this all the time with Every time a participant is in our study, we talk about it. We talk about it to every tribal council every time we go in the community. We talk about it with the review board multiple times a year. But as a documentation, maybe an easy solution, you guys know more about this than me, but an easy solution it seems that I've been required to do is that for everything we publish or share publicly with other scientists, well, we not only have to get permission before we publish it or share it, but the final report as a scientist is the paper. And then we have to, that's the next step and the last step for that project. We have to submit that paper with a 2-page lay summary. You know, what question did we want to ask? What do we find out? And what did it mean? So maybe that would help in the longevity of cataloging. And all my researcher friends may not like it, but it puts a little bit of the burden on us so that you don't have to do quite as much yourself with the limited staff.
We require that.
I think all of us do. But I think with her question, it was more about why were you cataloging the past research. But yes, we all do have the pre-publications, adding our tribal IRB and the consent. Like, this is just, yep. These are just things that, with the help of CRCA, our oversight is more sound compared to not even having research oversight in our community before. I mean, you had people who had no experience in looking at protocols, approving protocols. So I'm glad that we all have these things, but yes, we want to share with other tribes that they should, whether they have a tribal IRB or it's a board, whatever it may be, that these are the types of things you're requesting, because then you have a real use for that data.
My name is J.R. LaPlante. I'm a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, and I work for Avera Health. I'm the Director of Tribal Relations, and I want to thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us. I've been kind of following the tribal IRB process over the years. I used to work for my tribal administration when we first started having discussions about it back in the late 90s, and I know it's a struggle to get our elected officials to see research as a priority. And also to pass codes and pass laws, and then also to fund those laws to support your work. But I see all the work you've done, and it's really encouraging, but I'm a little concerned about it coming to an end with the end of this, the funding. So my question is this function part, at least historically, and fiscally a part of something that IHS could fund? And is it a function that could be 638 contracted? That's my first question. And then my second question is, what efforts have you made to talk with our congressionals about finding alternate funding? Maybe to have a federal law passed to help fund your efforts going forward. Thank you again for your work.
No, when you said 638.
Well, they already fund the IHS works, right? So our local, so this is going to be all at the workshop tonight. I'm going to use Heather's words. So, yeah, you'll wait. Are you coming to the workshop? Okay. Yeah, because this is a discussion that we have in the workshop about the different types of IRBs, and that the IHS is a required one. So any health-related research dealing with Indian Health Service has to go through IHS, and those are federally funded IRBs. So, I'm sure there is an option, and Turtle Mountain has been talking with our congressional delegation, and we were even awarded a small planning research grant to do some research and trying to take that to another level. And so there is discussions about sustainability and working with your congressional and in North Dakota we have. So with our governor, we've had those discussions with them. So, but we will talk about the other piece at the workshop. Okay. She's always got to go all the way across the rooms.
We have about 8 minutes. So, Abigail Akohak, just in answering JR's question a little bit, and some of the work that I've done previously in tribal IRBs, and also thinking about Indigenous data sovereignty. So there are some contexts to this. So the Indian Health Service does a great job with what they have in doing IRB approvals at their area. They're very underfunded, in particular in this area. And so that is something always that should be on our advocacy radar for tribal nations, that there should be funding for the Indian Health Service's IRB services. However, those services are related directly to Indian Health Service data. A lot of the data that we're talking about today didn't come from the Indian Health Service. And so their purview does not apply. And so the building of tribal IRBs, and then a tribal IRB in Turtle Mountain is probably very different than what they want to do at the Nez Perce tribe in Idaho. So really looking at the unique cultural considerations of the individual areas. And the possibility of the federal government funding things like that would be incredible. I think that's a great idea to ask for an appropriations around a research agenda for Indian country, which really hasn't ever been done, but would be an incredible thing to do. The one thing that I do at the Urban Indian Health Institute is to recognize that we have about 65% of our people currently do not live on tribal lands. They still are tribal people. Federal trust responsibility does not end because I stepped off the reservation. I'm an enrolled member of a federally recognized tribe. There is trust responsibility to me. And we recognize that within the urban programs. What I have found over the course of many years is that many people who wish to work with American Indians, Alaska Natives, sometimes just because it looks good on their grant application, will attempt to go into the urban settings to skip over any tribal reviews, not have to go through the Indian Health Service, and go straight to their university's review. What happens is many of the urban programs don't participate in research as a direct result. As the inability to express tribal sovereignty, so what you were talking about, Dr. Boyer was saying, come in, do the presentations, make sure you review manuscripts, etc. The tribal organizations that exist within urban settings cannot exercise tribal sovereignty. And so whereas for example, if I'm working at a tribe and somebody does a presentation that they didn't get approved through the tribal council or tribal IRB, I can directly complain, make a complaint to their funder at the NIH or EPA, wherever they're being funded from. However, I can't do that if they did the same thing in an urban setting, because while it is unethical, it's not an unethical thing that would cause them to possibly lose their funding, again, because tribal sovereignty as legally defined right now does not apply. There is a school of thought for those of us who are part of the U.S. Indigenous Data Sovereignty Network. You can go Google that. There's a website. There's a website for everything, but U.S. Indigenous Data Sovereignty Network, where we look at the rights of indigenous people that was passed to the UN and ratified by the United States, that talks about indigenous data and the fact that any information gathered on Native people should be governed, utilized by Native people. And so there are efforts underway right now to think about that within the urban setting. So what we're doing at the Urban Indian Health Institute over the last 9 months, I have been testing a urban Indian research review. So I know that our urban centers are afraid, not all of them, but some of them, because of the predatory research that has happened, the people wanting to skip over tribal review by working in urban settings. And so we've been testing a research review processes that I'm going to launch in a couple months here for the urban programs. I'm just launching it to the urban programs for them to put processes in place that they can begin to formulate these partnerships, because again, research is really important. When done correctly, it does incredible things to benefit our community. So we're trying to put these systems in place, similar to what you guys have done in your own individual settings, but thinking about it from the urban context, the inability currently to exercise tribal sovereignty over our health information here specifically, and putting together a toolkit that somewhat mirrors an IRB, but is more about the community building a relationship, asking the right questions, knowing the right questions to ask, and what it takes from a resource perspective to ensure that this is sustainable over time.
And I'm hoping to, in May, ask the Appropriations Committee to fund a research agenda for Indian country. But I think there has to be lots of voices asking that same thing. And always think about our urban relatives. We need to quit concentrating on the urban and think about the Indian. Where I live does not determine my tribal roots. And particularly in research, because that does allow for people to skip over tribal review, it has the opportunity for predatory research to continue. And so think about your urban relatives and how these kinds of things also apply to them. Thanks.
I just wanted to add to that quickly and say thank you for sharing your thoughts. But and this is just food for thought for the audience. It actually won't be in the workshop. But so the predatory, like she was explaining, that happens on reservations too. It's not just in urban areas. And so something I've noticed now that our tribe has a IRB. And I know there's researchers in the room, so I'm not trying to focus on the negative or make it sound like researchers are bad. But I know of projects that will go to tribes that don't have any research oversight because they have an in, or they can get it through council or Human Services Board or Health Board or whatever it may be. So it does happen on reservations too. But then the flip side of that is being in this position, I've had calls. A lot of my work is through email, but I've gotten actual calls from some of our researchers, native and non-native. All of them have been external, not a part of our community. But I've gotten calls from them saying, I'm so glad that your tribe has a tribal IRB. Do you know of other tribes that have them so I can try to do or get a grant and do a project there? I mean, so there is the flip side to that, and that's just a story that isn't always told, or isn't always heard. So I remember the first time I got a phone call like that, and it was a Native researcher, and she was not from our state. And I remember thinking, wow, I can't believe she took the time to call me to tell me, I really appreciate your process, because I thought we drug her through the mud. We changed her protocol so many times, and we really demanded a lot of things. But she was so humble and respectful about it. And she was one of the first researchers that I had got to really work with one-on-one outside of our tribal IRB. And so I was a little afraid that that was going to set me up for higher expectations of researchers. But since then, I've had that happen more and more, where partnerships are starting to build between, even if it's just between myself, the one-person research office, and external organizations or institutions that have researchers that are conducting on our reservation. Those are huge steps in our community, at least. Does my tribal leadership know about that? No. Most people in my community don't understand the work I'm even doing. And they say, what's the research you're doing? And I'm like, I'm not doing any research. It's not at all what I do. So I just do want to give that a shout out to researchers that, there really is two sides of the spectrum. There's people that are going the easy route, and there's people that are doing the best they can that don't have a lot of cultural knowledge, that are trying to learn and not come in and save our community, but really come in and try to be a part of our community. So those are just my closing thoughts, I guess.
Is there time for more questions, Melissa, or should they bring them to the workshop that you've mentioned a few times?
So with that, I will say Pilami Amigwech, and thank you guys for all your amazing questions, and the tribal partners for your panel and your thoughts.